Elizabeth Proctor enters and is informed her husband is to be hanged at sunup. Hale implores Elizabeth to speak with John and convince him to confess, even if it is a lie. Hale believes that God damns a liar less than he that throws his life away for pride. Elizabeth agrees to speak with John, but promises nothing. John Proctor is in chains when he is let in. He has not seen his wife in 3 months, and the couple is nearly overcome with emotion when they are left alone. Elizabeth reveals that over 100 people have confessed to witchcraft, but Rebecca Nurse has resigned herself to die. So too has Martha Corey. Giles Corey avoided hanging by remaining silent, but he didn't avoid execution. Giles would only say, "More weight," as large stones were heaped upon his body until he was pressed to death. John begs Elizabeth to tell him what she would have him do, but Elizabeth refuses to answer. She wants him alive, she says, but insists it is not her place to judge him. John doesn't know whether to confess or remain silent, and says that all he really wants is for Elizabeth to forgive his adultery. Elizabeth believes she cannot forgive John unless he first forgives himself. Elizabeth also admits that she has had her own sins to count. It needs a cold wife, she says, to prompt lechery. Hathorne returns and demands that John make up his mind, as the sun is almost up. John responds that he wants his life. Hathorne runs from the room screaming, "He will confess! Proctor will confess!" Proctor is racked with emotion, convinced the lie he is about to tell is another example of his weakness in the face of evil. Elizabeth and John have not seen each other in 3 months. There is a tragic beauty in how the couple manages to make their peace with one another in this scene. John had not spoken with Elizabeth since he publicly announced his guilt, but the very airing of his secret allows him to look forward in his life, and he certainly hopes to do so with Elizabeth. Elizabeth, too, has been transformed. Finally, she has the strength to forgive John, and she even admits that she was partly to blame for his transgression. John wrestles with the decision to confess. Together with Elizabeth, he decides that he will confess and live. Proctor reckons that he is not, like Martha Corey and Rebecca Nurse, bound by religious conviction. Instead, he is bound by principle, and knows that if he should hang, the court will feel the burden of guilt, knowing that they have let an innocent man die. John is tormented by the decision because he believes it is evil to lie, but he also believes that his former lechery precludes him from ever again being a saintly figure. So, he reasons, his confession will be nothing more than another sin from an already fallen sinner. Question 1. What did Giles say as he was pressed to death by stones? "Forgive my sins. Remember my good name. I now see the truth. More weight." Giles would only say, "More weight," as large stones were heaped upon him, pressing him to death. Question 2. John is tormented by his decision to confess because he wants to protect Abigail. He fears for his family's safety. He knows that he will be killed. He believes it is evil to lie. John is tormented by his decision to confess because he believes it is evil to lie. Question 3. When Elizabeth says it needs a cold wife to prompt lechery, she is admitting she has her own sins to count, ridiculing John's affair, hinting at her intentions to leave him, wishing that she were dead. When Elizabeth says it needs a cold wife to prompt lechery, she is admitting she has her own sins to count, and admitting that she had her own role to play in John's transgression. Danforth returns and eagerly questions Proctor, informing him that his confession will be posted on the church door as an example to all. Proctor admits he saw the devil, and that the devil bid him do his work upon the earth. Rebecca Nurse is weak and can barely stand up when she enters in the middle of Proctor's interrogation. Rebecca is shocked to hear that John is confessing and insists that she herself cannot confess, for it would be a lie. Proctor refuses to implicate any other names in his testimony, and after some reluctance, Proctor agrees to sign his confession, but then refuses to give it back to Danforth. Proctor argues it should be enough that he has confessed his sins to God. Proctor is crying, wild with emotion, when he tells Danforth he's already given his soul to the court, but he'll not give them his name. When Danforth insists Proctor hand over the signed confession or be hanged, Proctor suddenly tears it up. He is weeping in fury, but is proud and defiant. Terrified, Elizabeth bursts into tears. John lifts her up and tells her she must be strong. Give them no tear. Tears pleasure them, he says. Show honor now, show a stony heart, and sink them with it. John kisses Elizabeth with great passion and is led from the jail, as Danforth cries out, "Hang them high over the town. Who weeps for these, weeps for corruption." Reverend Hale begs Elizabeth to go after John and plead with him to change his mind, but Elizabeth refuses. "He have his goodness now," she says. "God forbid I take it from him." The final scene of the Crucible is the scene of John Proctor's redemption. Having already agreed to confess, he falters when asked to sign his confession. Knowing that his lie will be tacked to the church door for all to see stirs uncertainty in his gut. Proctor believes that the public display of his confession would serve only to mock his friends and neighbors who have already died, refusing to confess a lie. When Elizabeth Nurse is carried past Proctor, her willingness to go to the gallows impresses Proctor with even more guilt. Remember that although Proctor is a sinner, and although he was reluctant to admit his lechery for fear of shame, he did, in the end, confess his sin. When confronted with the chance to bed Abigail Williams, he failed to resist temptation. Now, again, he is tempted by sin, the sin of lying. The choice is clear, and it is the ultimate test of character. Bear false witness or lie, and he'll save his life. Tell the truth by remaining silent, and he'll preserve his honor in death. Proctor tears up the confession, and in doing so keeps intact his good name, his honor, and his dignity. Danforth demands to know why. Arthur Miller writes in the stage direction that Proctor erupts with a cry of his whole soul. "Because it is my name, because I cannot have another in my life, because I lie and sign myself to lies, because I am not worth the dust on the feet of them that hang. How may I live without my name? I have given you my soul, leave me my name." And with that, John Proctor signs his own death warrant, and at last finds the goodness he sought in himself. Question 1. What does Danforth plan to do with Proctor's signed confession? Destroy it. Post it on the church door. Spend no less than a week's time scrutinizing its contents. Read it aloud at a town meeting. Danforth plans to post John's signed confession on the church door. Question 2. Proctor believes that the public display of his confession would mock those who have already died, refusing to confess a lie, be an appropriate punishment, cause a riot, cause Elizabeth more pain than she could ever bear. Proctor believes that the public display of his confession would mock those who have already died, refusing to confess a lie. Question 3. When Danforth demands Proctor hand over the signed confession, Proctor suddenly flees the room, tears it up, offers a heartfelt apology, grabs Danforth by the throat. When Danforth demands Proctor hand over the signed confession, Proctor suddenly tears it up. In the final analysis, The Crucible is a story of how a community can cease to function when its focus is diverted by fears of the unknown. In the real events of 1692, the devil was the unknown quantity. In 1950s America, it was the so-called Red Scare of communism. In both cases, the argument can be made, the community failed to survive its own spiral of paranoia. However, as the Crucible ends, we take heart from the redemption of John Proctor, who, in his final act of defiance, signs his own death warrant, and in doing so lends his signature to a doctrine of principle, dignity,